Let's go. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
The Boys is an American superhero television series that completely redefines the traditional concept of superheroes by presenting them not as noble saviors but as deeply flawed, dangerous, and morally corrupt individuals. The series was created by Eric Kripke and developed for Amazon Prime Video. It is adapted from the comic book series of the same name by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson. The production of the show is handled by Sony Pictures Television in association with Amazon Studios, Kripke Enterprises, and Original Film. Unlike typical superhero stories that focus on hope, justice, and heroism, The Boys delivers a brutally realistic and darkly satirical vision of what would happen if superheroes actually existed in the modern world and were controlled by corporate interests. The show explores themes of power, corruption, celebrity worship, media manipulation, capitalism, political extremism, and moral responsibility. It is known for its graphic violence, shocking scenes, intense drama, adult language, and hard-hitting social commentary. The series is set in a world where superheroes, known as Supes, are manufactured using a substance called Compound V and marketed by a powerful corporation called Vought International. These superheroes are treated as global celebrities, brand ambassadors, and even military assets, while the public remains unaware of their crimes, abuse of power, and hidden atrocities. The story follows a group of ordinary humans known as the Boys, who take it upon themselves to expose the truth about the superheroes and bring them to justice by any means necessary. At the center of the narrative is Huey Campbell, a mild-mannered and kind-hearted young man whose life is destroyed when his girlfriend Robin is accidentally killed by A-Train, a speedster superhero and member of the Seven, the most elite superhero team owned by Vought. Robin's death is covered up by the corporation, and Huey is pressured to accept a financial settlement in exchange for his silence. Devastated and consumed by grief and anger, Huey is approached by a mysterious and ruthless man named Billy Butcher. Butcher recruits Huey into a secret vigilante group known as the Boys, whose goal is to expose the dark truth about superheroes and bring down Vought International. The group already consists of Frenchie, a brilliant but unstable weapons expert with a troubled past, Mother's Milk, also known as Emem, the moral backbone of the team and a disciplined tactician haunted by family trauma, and eventually Kimiko, a silent but deadly superpowered woman who becomes part of their mission. Unlike the celebrities they hunt, the Boys do not have official authority or public support. They operate in the shadows, using blackmail, espionage, brute force, and illegal methods to fight against beings who are far more powerful than they are. On the opposite side stands the Seven, the most powerful and famous superhero group in the world. The Seven are marketed as symbols of peace, justice, and American values. They include Homelander, the leader of the team and the most powerful supe alive, possessing abilities similar to Superman such as super strength, flight, heat vision, and near invulnerability. Behind his patriotic image, Homelander is a deeply disturbed, narcissistic, and cruel individual who craves love and validation while simultaneously despising humanity. His psychological instability is one of the most terrifying aspects of the series because of the immense power he wields. The rest of the Seven include Queen Maeve, a warrior with immense strength and durability who struggles with guilt and disillusionment, A-Train, the fastest man alive who is addicted to performance-enhancing drugs, the Deep, an aquatic hero who can communicate with sea life but is deeply insecure and morally weak, Starlight, also known as Annie January, a sincere and idealistic young superheroine who joins the Seven believing in justice only to gradually uncover the horrific truth about the organization, Translucent, who has the power of invisibility and serves as an early example of the team's corruption, and later members like Black Noir and Stormfront, each bringing their own dark secrets and ideological dangers. As the story progresses, the invisible war between the Boys and the Seven intensifies. Huey transforms from a timid and grieving man into someone forced to confront his own capacity for violence and moral compromise. Billy Butcher's backstory slowly unfolds, revealing that his hatred for superheroes is deeply personal. His wife Becca was assaulted by Homelander and later disappeared, believed dead. This fuels Butcher's obsession with destroying Homelander and everything Vought stands for. The show carefully explores how vengeance can consume a person and blur the lines between justice and cruelty. Throughout the seasons, numerous conspiracies are uncovered, including the revelation that superheroes are not born naturally but are created using Compound V, a secret pharmaceutical chemical developed by Vought. This discovery shakes the entire world when it is eventually leaked to the media, dismantling the myth that Supes are divinely gifted individuals. Starlight's journey is particularly important to the moral core of the story. She enters the Seven as a symbol of innocence and hope, only to be immediately faced with sexual abuse, exploitation, and corporate manipulation. Her struggle to hold on to her integrity while surviving within such a corrupt system becomes one of the emotional anchors of the series. Her developing relationship with Huey adds a tragic and human dimension to the larger conflict. They are forced to keep secrets from each other, standing on opposing sides of a hidden war while trying to protect each other from the brutal truth. The series explores political and social issues with brutal honesty. Vought International functions not only as a media empire but also as a military contractor seeking to place superheroes in national defense across the globe. The show satirizes celebrity culture, propaganda, religious exploitation, corporate lobbying, social media manipulation, and extremist ideology. Stormfront's character, in particular, introduces a terrifying exploration of modern fascism and online radicalization. Her cheerful public persona hides a deeply racist and violent ideology, revealing how easily hateful beliefs can be repackaged for modern audiences. Violence in The Boys is not glorified but depicted as sudden, shocking, and often horrifying. Innocent lives are frequently lost as collateral damage in superhero battles, and the psychological consequences of such destruction are deeply explored. Unlike traditional superhero media, where destruction is brushed aside, The Boys forces the audience to confront the human cost of unchecked power. Each season escalates the emotional, political, and physical stakes. The boys face internal conflicts, betrayals, loss, and moral dilemmas as they struggle to survive against godlike enemies. Homelander's gradual descent into full authoritarian tyranny becomes one of the central threats of the series. He evolves from a symbol controlled by corporate handlers into a near unstoppable force driven by ego, rage, and the desire for absolute dominance. The show balances brutal action with sharp humor and emotional depth. Frenchie's tragic past, MM's struggle with family responsibilities and trauma, Kimiko's journey from a traumatized weapon into a person seeking identity and peace, and Huey's constant battle between fear and courage all add layers to the story. Billy Butcher remains one of the most complex characters, both a hero and a villain in his own way, whose ruthless methods often mirror the cruelty of the enemies he fights. The Boys first premiered on Amazon Prime Video on July 26, 2019. The first season consisted of 8 episodes and received immediate critical acclaim for its originality, fearless storytelling, and powerful performances. The second season was released on September 4, 2020, further expanding the world, deepening the themes, and introducing Stormfront as a major antagonist. The third season premiered on June 3, 2022, pushing the narrative into even darker territory and introducing temporary superpowers through a modified version of Compound V known as Temp V. The fourth season was released in 2024, continuing the escalating conflict between Homelander and the remaining forces that oppose him. Each season has maintained high viewership and cultural impact, making The Boys one of the most successful and talked about series in streaming television history. The cast of The Boys is one of its greatest strengths. Karl Urban delivers a powerful and unforgettable performance as Billy Butcher, blending brutal intensity with dark humor and emotional vulnerability. Jack Quaid plays Huey Campbell with sincerity and relatability, making his transformation deeply believable. Anthony Starr's portrayal of Homelander is widely considered one of the greatest villain performances in modern television, capturing both godlike arrogance and childlike emotional instability in terrifying balance. Erin Moriarty brings emotional depth and strength to the role of Starlight. Dominique McElligott plays Queen Maeve with quiet strength and suppressed regret. Jesse T. Usher embodies the recklessness and insecurity of A-Train. Chase Crawford's portrayal of the Deep illustrates the emptiness behind superficial fame. Laz Alonso as Mother's Milk provides grounded realism and moral discipline to the team. Tomer Capone's Frenchie is chaotic yet emotionally fragile, while Karen Fukuhara's Kimiko communicates immense emotion without spoken language. Supporting performances by actors such as Giancarlo Esposito as Stan Edgar, Aya Cash as Stormfront, and Colby Minify as Ashley Barrett add further depth to the corporate and political layers of the story. The success of The Boys lies in its fearless approach to storytelling. It does not shy away from uncomfortable truths or controversial themes. It presents a world where power is rarely used responsibly and where truth is manipulated for profit and control. The series questions the very idea of hero worship and forces viewers to consider the dangers of blindly trusting those in power. It also explores how ordinary people respond when faced with overwhelming injustice and superior force. The moral ambiguity of nearly every character ensures that the audience is constantly challenged to rethink traditional definitions of good and evil. From a technical standpoint, The Boys is praised for its high production quality, cinematic visuals, realistic action choreography, and impressive visual effects. The soundtrack and sound design enhance both the emotional and brutal aspects of the story. The writing is sharp, layered with satire, and bold in its social criticism. The adaptation remains loyal to the spirit of the original comics while modernizing themes for contemporary audiences. In conclusion, The Boys is not just a superhero show, it is a powerful, disturbing, entertaining, and thought-provoking series that deconstructs the entire superhero genre. By combining extreme action with psychological drama and political commentary, it offers a unique viewing experience that challenges viewers intellectually and emotionally. It exposes the myths of heroism, the corruption of power, and the price of rebellion in a world dominated by corporate-controlled gods. Its complex characters, shocking twists, and fearless storytelling have secured its place as one of the most influential television series of the modern streaming era. Continuing from where we left off, the later developments in The Boys further deepen the psychological, emotional, and political complexity of the series. As the story moves forward beyond the initial foundation, the conflict between the boys and the Seven evolves into something far more dangerous than a simple battle between vigilantes and corrupted heroes. The struggle becomes a global power war involving governments, corporations, extremist ideologies, and godlike beings who no longer wish to be controlled. The line between who is truly evil and who is simply trying to survive becomes increasingly blurred. Homelander's character arc grows darker with each passing season. What initially appears as arrogance and cruelty begins to reveal itself as a terrifying psychological breakdown caused by lifelong emotional deprivation, corporate experimentation, and the burden of absolute power without accountability. Raised in a laboratory without parental love, Homelander develops an unbearable hunger for affection, approval, and dominance all at once. His public image as a patriotic savior stands in stark contrast to his real self, who increasingly abandons restraint. As public opinion starts to turn and as he feels his control slipping, Homelander becomes more volatile, more violent, and more openly fascistic. The series presents his descent not as a sudden change but as a slow unraveling, showing how unchecked authority and narcissism can transform a powerful individual into a living catastrophe. His relationship with his son Ryan becomes a critical emotional axis of the story, forcing him to confront feelings he does not fully understand while simultaneously attempting to shape the child into his own image. Ryan's presence in the narrative adds an entirely new moral dimension. As the only naturally born Supe known to the world, Ryan represents a threat to Vought's monopoly over Compound V and simultaneously a possible future where superpowers are no longer controlled by a single corporation. His innocence, vulnerability, and confusion stand in sharp contrast to the corruption surrounding him. The battle over Ryan's future becomes symbolic of the larger struggle between manipulation and free will, between power used for control and power used for protection. Billy Butcher's complicated relationship with Ryan, driven by his love for Becca and his hatred for Homelander, becomes one of the most emotionally painful aspects of the series. Butcher constantly struggles between his desire for revenge and his duty to protect the last living connection to the woman he loved. Becca Butcher's hidden survival and later tragic fate introduce one of the most devastating emotional arcs in the show. Her decision to hide Ryan from the world, to protect him from becoming like his father, reflects the series' central question about whether power inevitably corrupts or whether environment and guidance can still shape a different outcome. Her death leaves deep scars on both Butcher and Ryan, driving Butcher further into self-destruction and leaving Ryan vulnerable to Homelander's influence. This tragedy reinforces the brutal realism of the show, where innocent people often pay the highest price for the battles of powerful beings. The internal dynamics of the boys themselves continue to evolve. Mother's Milk's struggle with his past and his family responsibilities becomes more intense as the danger escalates. His conflict with Butcher frequently highlights the moral divide between justice and vengeance. Consistently seeks a boundary that Butcher refuses to respect, illustrating the constant tension between maintaining one's humanity and embracing brutality for survival. Frenchie's guilt over his past actions as a killer and criminal continues to haunt him. His relationship with Kimiko becomes one of the most emotionally sincere elements of the series. Both characters, shaped by extreme violence and exploitation, attempt to find redemption and peace in a world that constantly drags them back into bloodshed. Kimiko's journey in particular explores the trauma of being turned into a weapon and the struggle to reclaim one's identity after years of dehumanization. Huey's transformation remains one of the most grounded arcs in the show. From a powerless civilian to an active participant in a violent underground war, he constantly wrestles with fear, guilt, and the consequences of his choices. His use of Temp V, which temporarily grants humans superpowers, reveals his internal conflict between wanting to remain morally pure and his growing frustration with helplessness. The temporary power rush shows how easily even good people can become addicted to the feeling of superiority. His relationship with Starlight continues to be tested by secrets, lies, and the dangerous world they inhabit. Their love becomes a fragile refuge in a narrative defined by betrayal and manipulation. Starlight's role grows steadily stronger as she transitions from a manipulated corporate mascot into a public symbol of resistance. By exposing Vought's crimes and standing against Homelander despite immense risk, she represents the possibility of moral courage within a corrupted system. Her public defiance shows how truth can become a weapon even against godlike enemies, though it also illustrates how dangerous the cost of such defiance can be. Her journey highlights the emotional toll of standing up for one's beliefs when the world punishes integrity. Vought International remains one of the most terrifying antagonistic forces in the series, precisely because it is not a single villain but a vast system of profit, propaganda, and political manipulation. Through executives like Stan Edgar and later leadership figures, the series shows how cold corporate logic treats superheroes not as people but as assets, weapons, and brand products. Vought's experiments on children, its secret global trafficking of Compound V, and its willingness to sacrifice entire communities for political leverage paint a chilling portrait of unchecked corporate power. Even when executives appear calm and rational, their decisions result in mass death and suffering. The show makes it clear that Homelander may be the monster on the front lines, but Vought created him, enabled him, and continues to benefit from his brutality. The political satire of The Boys becomes sharper as the series progresses. The show mirrors real-world political polarization, media manipulation, extremist radicalization, and the weaponization of fear. Superheroes are used as political tools to fuel nationalism, religious fanaticism, and ideological violence. Public rallies, propaganda campaigns, and social media wars within the series feel disturbingly close to real-world events. The narrative demonstrates how easily truth can be buried beneath spectacle and how public opinion can be engineered through fear and fantasy. Homelander's growing support among radical fanbases becomes a haunting reflection of how authoritarian figures gain mass followings by exploiting insecurity and hatred. Stormfront's arc plays a critical role in this political commentary. Her reveal as an immortal Nazi extremist reshapes the audience's understanding of how deeply hatred can hide behind modern branding and internet culture. By presenting her as charismatic and socially savvy, the series demonstrates how dangerous ideologies can be disguised as empowerment and progress. Her death does not end the threat she represents, as the ideas she spreads continue to influence others long after she is gone. The introduction of Soldier Boy, the original American Supe and a dark parody of patriotic war heroes, adds another level of thematic depth. As Homelander's father, both biologically and symbolically, Soldier Boy embodies an older, more openly abusive form of power. His brutal behavior, emotional cruelty, and reckless destruction reflect a past era of unchecked militarism and toxic masculinity. Through him, the series explores generational trauma, cycles of abuse, and how violence is inherited both genetically and culturally. The conflict between Homelander and Soldier Boy becomes a twisted family tragedy played out on a national and global scale. The concept of Temp V fundamentally alters the balance of power in the narrative. By allowing ordinary humans to gain temporary superpowers, it challenges the idea that only Supes can fight Supes. However, the drug's deadly side effects serve as a grim reminder that power always comes at a cost. Butcher and Huey's use of Temp V forces them to confront the same temptation that corrupts the heroes they despise. The show cleverly uses this plot device to demonstrate that the real danger lies not in who holds the power, but in how easily power reshapes human values. As the series advances toward its later stages, the emotional landscape becomes increasingly tragic. Loss, betrayal, and irreversible consequences become more frequent. Characters are forced to confront the fact that victory may not mean survival or happiness, but merely delaying an inevitable catastrophe. The world of the boys grows grimmer as the protective illusions of morality, justice, and heroism continue to collapse. From a storytelling perspective, the show's structure remains bold and unpredictable. Major characters can die suddenly, alliances shift without warning, and long-term plans collapse under the weight of chaos. This unpredictability keeps the audience in constant tension, reinforcing the idea that in a world of superhuman power, no one is truly safe. The violence is not stylized for glamour but instead portrayed as ugly, sudden, and horrifying, emphasizing its irreversible impact. The public response to The Boys has been immense across the globe. The series has become a cultural phenomenon, generating debates about politics, power, celebrity worship, and morality. Critics have widely praised its fearless storytelling, complex characters, and Anthony Starr's chilling performance as Homelander. The show has received numerous awards and nominations for acting, writing, visual effects, and overall production quality. Viewers often describe it as one of the most disturbing yet intellectually engaging shows in modern television. Beyond the main series, the universe of The Boys has expanded through spin-off projects, most notably Gen V. This spin-off explores young Supes being trained at a secret university operated by Vought. It reveals how corruption begins at an early age and how ambition, insecurity, and corporate pressure shape the next generation of superpowered individuals. The expansion of the universe reinforces the idea that the problem is not limited to a few individuals but is embedded deeply into the entire structure of this world. The philosophical core of The Boys lies in its relentless questioning of power. It asks whether absolute power can ever coexist with true morality. It challenges the audience to consider whether institutions built on profit and control can ever truly serve humanity. It exposes how easily people trade freedom and truth for comfort and fantasy. Through its characters, the show repeatedly emphasizes that heroism is not defined by powers or costumes, but by choices made in moments of fear, sacrifice, and uncertainty. As the series moves toward its final chapters, the looming threat of Homelander's complete takeover of power becomes more explicit. The possibility of a full-scale authoritarian regime led by a superhuman dictator transforms the narrative into a warning about the future of power in any society that elevates individuals beyond accountability. The resistance mounted by The Boys grows more desperate, more fractured, and more morally compromised, reflecting the brutal reality that fighting monsters often risks turning one into a monster as well. In its deepest form, The Boys is not simply a story about superheroes and villains, it is a cautionary tale about human nature itself. The Supes are exaggerated reflections of real human flaws, greed, ego, insecurity, cruelty, and the hunger for control. The ordinary humans in the series, though powerless in comparison, often display the same weaknesses when given even a fraction of power. This parallel reinforces the series' bleak but honest message: the true danger is not superpowers, but the human heart when freed from consequences. The emotional weight of the series is strengthened by its willingness to let characters suffer the outcomes of their decisions. Redemption is rare and costly. Forgiveness is uncertain. Justice, when it appears, is often incomplete or morally ambiguous. These elements give the series a tragic realism that separates it from typical genre entertainment. As the story continues to build toward its ultimate conclusion, every major character stands at a crossroads shaped by trauma, guilt, ambition, and fear. Billy Butcher faces the reality that his war against Supes may consume what remains of his soul. Huey must decide whether he can continue living in violence without losing his humanity. Starlight carries the burden of being a public symbol in a world that punishes truth. Homelander's final transformation toward uncontrollable tyranny looms like a shadow over the entire narrative. The Boys stands as one of the boldest reimaginings of the superhero genre in modern entertainment. It strips away fantasy and replaces it with the brutal mechanics of power, corruption, and consequence. It does not offer easy heroes or comforting resolutions. Instead, it presents a world where survival often comes at the expense of innocence, where justice is fragile, and where the fight against oppression is endless and devastating. This relentless realism, combined with its unapologetic satire, complex character arcs, and fearless political commentary, is what makes The Boys a landmark series in contemporary television. It challenges viewers not only to be entertained but to question the systems of power in their own world and the figures they choose to idolize. It reminds us that the most dangerous monsters are not created by supernatural forces, but by human ambition, fear, and the desire to dominate without limits. If you want, I can continue even further with a deep psychological analysis of every main character, symbolic meanings, hidden Easter eggs, controversies, banned scenes, censorship history, and a complete future-ending prediction based on comics and current storyline to fully reach your extended word target. Continuing further, the later expansion of The Boys universe and the deeper layers of its narrative reveal how deliberately the creators designed this series as both entertainment and a social warning. As the story advances beyond simple revenge and survival, it becomes a study of how power systems are built, maintained, challenged, and ultimately reshaped by individuals who are themselves deeply flawed. The growing scope of the series brings governments, international politics, secret scientific programs, religious movements, and extremist groups into the conflict, transforming what began as a localized underground war into a global struggle for the future of humanity. One of the most disturbing and impactful revelations in the series is how early Vought begins corrupting individuals through Compound V. Children are injected at a young age without consent, their entire lives shaped by corporate contracts, media training, and psychological conditioning. These children never choose to become heroes, they are engineered into them. This strips away the romantic idea of destiny and replaces it with exploitation. The series repeatedly returns to this idea, that almost every Supe is, at their core, a victim of a system that values profit over human life. However, The Boys never allows this fact to excuse the crimes they commit. Instead, it presents a complex moral tension between victimhood and accountability. The Gen V storyline further expands on this theme by showing how young Supes are trained in a controlled academic environment that pretends to be a normal university while secretly serving as a testing ground for Vought's future weapons. Ambition, competition, insecurity, and political manipulation dominate the campus. Students are pushed to harm each other for rankings and contracts, reinforcing the idea that from the very beginning, Supes are taught to value fame and power over ethics. This reinforces the central message that corruption in this world is not an accident, it is engineered. The psychological depth of Homelander continues to unfold in chilling ways. His desperate need for love contrasts tragically with his inability to understand love in any healthy sense. Every relationship he touches becomes contaminated by fear and domination. He confuses loyalty with worship and affection with submission. His increasing isolation only reinforces his belief that humanity exists beneath him. As public resistance grows, rather than reflecting on his actions, he becomes more convinced that the world simply needs stronger control. This mirrors real-world patterns seen in authoritarian leaders, where insecurity, ego, and paranoia combine into a deadly form of governance. The show skillfully uses Homelander's public speeches and media appearances to illustrate how language can be weaponized. His words are designed to stir emotion, create division, and solidify loyalty through fear and identity rather than truth. Supporters do not follow him because he is just, they follow him because he makes them feel powerful, seen, and protected. This is one of the most politically charged elements of the series, showing how mass psychology can be manipulated through spectacle rather than substance. Billy Butcher's decline is equally tragic but in a very different way. Where Homelander represents corruption through absolute power, Butcher represents corruption through absolute obsession. His inability to let go of revenge slowly destroys his relationships, his health, and his sense of self. Even when he performs heroic acts, they are often driven by rage rather than compassion. The use of Temp V accelerates his physical and mental deterioration, symbolizing how borrowing power from the monsters he hates is slowly turning him into one of them. Butcher's story is a painful exploration of how trauma, when left unresolved, transforms into self-destructive vengeance. Huey's evolution reaches a more mature phase as he begins to understand the full consequences of violence and power. He becomes less reactionary and more reflective, realizing that fighting back does not automatically make one righteous. His internal conflict between wanting to protect the people he loves and refusing to lose his moral core becomes one of the most realistic portrayals of a civilian caught in an extraordinary war. Unlike Butcher, who embraces darkness as a tool, Huey constantly fights to keep a sense of normal humanity alive within himself. Starlight's public journey grows into something far beyond personal resistance. She becomes a figure of opposition not just to Vought and Homelander but to the culture of silence and complicity. By refusing to play the role of a controlled celebrity, she demonstrates that influence does not only come from power but also from truth and integrity. However, the series is careful to show that truth alone does not magically fix the world. Even when she exposes crimes, consequences are slow, partial, and often manipulated by stronger forces. This realism prevents the story from becoming idealistic and keeps it grounded in the complexity of real social change. Queen Maeve's arc is a tragedy of suppressed identity and lost hope. Once an idealistic hero herself, she slowly becomes disillusioned by long-term exposure to corruption and brutality. Her eventual acts of resistance come at enormous personal cost, symbolizing how survival within an evil system often requires sacrificing one's soul. Her struggle with fear, guilt, and substance abuse reflects the psychological toll of living daily with moral compromise. The deep storyline functions as a disturbing critique of shallow redemption arcs. Despite multiple attempts to rebrand himself as a reformed hero, his fundamental selfishness never fully disappears. This reinforces the show's rejection of easy forgiveness. Growth requires accountability, and without it, public apologies and image repairs are only surface-level performances. His character exposes how society often accepts performative change rather than genuine transformation. A-Train's arc similarly dismantles the idea of simple redemption. His guilt over past actions and his desire to escape the consequences of his crimes place him in constant conflict between self-preservation and responsibility. Even when he attempts to do the right thing, his motivations remain deeply tangled in fear, ambition, and shame. The show consistently demonstrates that remorse alone is not justice. The role of media within The Boys is portrayed as one of the most powerful forces in shaping reality. News networks, social media platforms, movie studios, and marketing departments all function as extensions of Vought's propaganda machine. Tragedies are repackaged as inspirational stories, crimes are buried beneath entertainment, and public outrage is redirected with calculated distractions. This constant manipulation blurs the line between truth and fiction for the population within the show, making it nearly impossible for ordinary people to distinguish reality from corporate storytelling. This is one of the most unsettling aspects of The Boys, as it directly parallels real-world media culture. From a production perspective, The Boys represents one of Amazon Prime Video's most ambitious and successful original projects. The creators invested heavily in practical effects combined with high-end visual effects to maintain a sense of realism in the violence and superpower sequences. Unlike many superhero productions that aim for polished spectacle, The Boys intentionally keeps its brutality raw and uncomfortable. Explosions are messy, bodies are fragile, and death is abrupt and often senseless. This design choice reinforces the show's tone and thematic purpose. The writing team is known for its layered storytelling, where character development, satire, and long-term narrative arcs are carefully interwoven. Many plot threads introduced in early seasons pay off years later, rewarding attentive viewers. Subtle visual symbolism, background news broadcasts, and throwaway dialogue often foreshadow major events far in advance. This attention to detail has contributed significantly to the series' critical acclaim. The series' soundtrack also plays an important role in shaping tone. Music is frequently used in ironic contrast to on-screen violence, creating a disturbing emotional dissonance. Patriotic songs are often played during moments of moral horror, reinforcing the show's critique of blind nationalism and hero worship. This deliberate audiovisual contrast strengthens the satirical edge of the narrative. Audience reception of The Boys has been both highly positive and intensely debated. Many viewers praise it as one of the most intelligent and fearless shows in the superhero genre. Critics highlight its originality, strong performances, and willingness to tackle difficult political and social themes. Anthony Starr's portrayal of Homelander, in particular, has been universally praised for its depth and unpredictability. At the same time, the show has faced controversy for its extreme violence, explicit content, and disturbing subject matter. Some viewers find its brutality excessive, while others argue that this very excess is necessary to convey the horror of unchecked power. The Boys has also generated significant discussion around its political messaging. Some viewers interpret the series as a critique of modern authoritarianism, nationalism, and corporate capitalism. Others view it as a broader commentary on human nature and the corrupting influence of fame and power. The fact that the show allows multiple interpretations without providing simple answers is one of its greatest strengths. Internationally, The Boys has achieved massive popularity, reaching audiences across North America, Europe, Asia, and beyond. Despite being deeply rooted in American political and cultural satire, its themes of corruption, inequality, and abuse of authority resonate universally. This global success demonstrates how its core message transcends national boundaries. Regarding release and distribution, each season of The Boys was launched strategically with both weekly episode releases and full season drops depending on the season. Promotional campaigns included trailers, teaser clips, viral marketing, and social media stunts that often blurred the line between the fictional world of Vought and real-world advertising. These campaigns themselves became extensions of the show's satire, with Vought-branded ads created as if the corporation actually existed. The trailers for The Boys are deliberately crafted to emphasize shock, dark humor, and emotional intensity without revealing major twists. They often juxtapose superhero imagery with brutal violence, immediately signaling that this is not a traditional hero story. Each season's trailer typically introduces its central threat while also hinting at internal conflicts among the Boys and the Seven. These trailers play a significant role in building anticipation and maintaining the series' cultural relevance between seasons. Merchandising for The Boys includes clothing, collectibles, and digital content, much of it branded under the fictional Vought Corporation. This ironic commercialization mirrors the very themes the show criticizes, creating a self-aware commentary on consumer culture. Even while critiquing corporate exploitation, the series exists within the same entertainment economy, a contradiction it openly acknowledges and satirizes. The adaptation from comic to television involved significant changes in tone, character depth, and narrative structure. While the original comics are far more extreme and cynical in many respects, the television series adds greater emotional nuance and psychological realism. Eric Kripke intentionally softened certain elements of the source material in order to focus more on character-driven storytelling rather than pure shock value. This creative decision helped broaden the show's appeal while preserving its core brutality. The long-term narrative direction of The Boys has always been planned with a definitive ending in mind rather than endless continuation. This has allowed the writers to structure character arcs with meaningful progression and inevitable consequences rather than infinite resets. As the series moves toward its final chapters, the sense of inevitability grows stronger. Every decision now carries the weight of an approaching conclusion where the fate of the world, the Supes, and the boys themselves will be decided. The ongoing tension suggests that the ultimate conflict will not simply be about defeating Homelander physically, but about dismantling the systems that created him. Even if one tyrant falls, another can rise as long as the foundation of exploitation remains intact. This broader thematic focus elevates the series from a standard hero versus villain narrative into a systemic critique of power itself. As the final confrontation approaches, the emotional stakes for every character intensify. Relationships are strained to their breaking points, trust becomes a rare and fragile commodity, and survival grows increasingly uncertain. The series prepares the audience for the possibility that not all heroes will survive, and that victory may come at a devastating cost. At its deepest level, The Boys asks a haunting question: if ordinary people were given godlike power, would the world truly become safer, or would it simply reflect humanity's darkest impulses on a larger scale? Through every season, every betrayal, and every tragedy, the series repeatedly suggests that power does not create monsters, it reveals them. If you would like, I can continue even further with a complete breakdown of future storyline direction based on comic parallels, ending possibilities, full cast filmography details, awards history, and a concluding philosophical summary of the entire series to fully complete your extended mega-document. Continuing further, we can now explore the final stages of The Boys' narrative, deep character arcs, thematic significance, and future possibilities, along with a comprehensive look at the cast, production, and broader cultural impact. As The Boys progresses into its later seasons, the stakes continue to escalate on every level: personal, social, and political. The final arcs of the series are expected to focus on the ultimate confrontation between Homelander and the forces aligned against him, primarily the boys. Homelander, now fully aware of his godlike power and increasingly unrestrained by any ethical or corporate oversight, represents an almost apocalyptic threat. His behavior evolves from erratic and manipulative to increasingly authoritarian and violent. His emotional instability, born from a lifetime of isolation, manipulation, and abuse, makes him unpredictable and dangerous. The stakes are no longer just about revenge or exposing corruption, they become a struggle for the survival of the entire human world against a being who sees himself as above humanity. Billy Butcher's arc continues to explore the consequences of vengeance. His obsession with destroying Homelander drives him to increasingly extreme measures, often placing himself, the boys, and innocents in danger. While Butcher's cunning and ruthlessness make him a formidable opponent, his moral compromise raises critical questions about the nature of justice and the cost of revenge. His use of temp v further symbolizes how adopting the methods of one's enemies can corrupt even the most righteous of crusaders. The interplay between Butcher's need for revenge and Huey's moral grounding provides the emotional core of the narrative. Huey acts as the audience's moral lens, struggling to balance the desire to fight back with the imperative to remain humane. Starlight's trajectory in the later seasons underscores the power and vulnerability of truth. She becomes a public symbol of resistance to Vought and Homelander, using media exposure, public speeches, and activism to counter the pervasive influence of propaganda. However, the series maintains its signature realism: standing for truth is neither safe nor glamorous. Starlight's activism is met with threats, sabotage, and manipulation, reflecting the harsh realities of speaking against entrenched power. Her evolving relationship with Huey also illustrates how love and personal loyalty persist even amidst chaos, though secrecy and moral conflict often strain this bond. The series continues to explore the generational and systemic nature of corruption. Soldier Boy's introduction highlights that abuse, toxic heroism, and corporate exploitation are not new phenomena, they are part of an enduring cycle. His history as the original patriotic Supe demonstrates that the same systems that produced Homelander were in place for decades, and that the current crisis is the cumulative result of years of systemic exploitation. Soldier Boy's violent tendencies, psychological trauma, and manipulation by Vought exemplify how institutions create their own monsters. Vought International itself remains a formidable antagonist, operating as a fully realized corporate empire that manipulates governments, media, and public perception for profit and power. Executives like Stan Edgar exemplify calculated, immoral leadership, prioritizing profit and control over human life. Through its portrayal of Vought, the series critiques real-world institutions that prioritize self-interest over ethics. The corporation's exploitation of children, manipulation of superheroes, and involvement in political interference serve as a recurring warning about the dangers of unchecked corporate power. The psychological and emotional toll of these events on the boys is immense. Frenchie and Kimiko's relationship continues to provide a deeply humanizing element amidst the chaos. Both characters have endured years of trauma, violence, and exploitation, and their struggle to build trust and intimacy highlights the theme of resilience in the face of systemic abuse. Mother's Milk remains the moral anchor of the team, constantly advocating for restraint, strategy, and accountability, even as violence escalates around him. The narrative's treatment of morality is one of its most sophisticated elements. Virtue and heroism are never straightforward. Even seemingly noble actions carry consequences, and even acts of revenge are complicated by the collateral damage they cause. By continually forcing characters to confront moral ambiguity, The Boys challenges viewers to consider the consequences of power and the price of justice. This complexity is reflected in every major storyline, from public uprisings to private acts of vengeance. The series also continues to incorporate sharp political and social satire. The manipulation of public opinion, the weaponization of media, the glorification of violence, and the exploitation of celebrity status all mirror real-world dynamics. Stormfront's rise and influence in the series serves as a chilling allegory for modern radicalization, demonstrating how extremist ideologies can be repackaged to appeal to contemporary audiences. The narrative emphasizes that the threat is not limited to superhuman villains but extends to social systems that reward power and spectacle over ethics and truth. In terms of production, The Boys continues to showcase a combination of practical effects, cutting-edge CGI, and meticulously choreographed stunts. The creative team consistently balances over-the-top superhero action with grounded realism, ensuring that violence is both visually spectacular and emotionally impactful. Sound design, music, and cinematography work in concert to heighten tension, build suspense, and underscore thematic messages. The visual and auditory presentation emphasizes the show's unique blend of satire, horror, and drama. The series' cast remains one of its strongest pillars. Anthony Starr's Homelander is widely regarded as one of the most compelling villain performances in television history. Karl Urban's Butcher demonstrates a remarkable range, portraying ruthlessness, humor, vulnerability, and moral conflict simultaneously. Erin Moriarty brings depth and strength to Starlight, capturing the emotional burden of integrity in a corrupt world. Jack Quaid's Huey provides the audience with an empathetic lens into this morally complex universe. Dominique McElligott, Laz Alonso, Jesse T. Usher, Tomer Capone, and Karen Fukuhara round out a cast that is consistently praised for its chemistry, depth, and nuanced performances. The public and critical reception of The Boys reflects its cultural impact. Critics have praised the series for its boldness, social relevance, and willingness to subvert genre conventions. It has sparked discussions on morality, power, corporate control, and the human consequences of unchecked authority. Its global appeal is a testament to the universality of these themes, and its influence can be seen in other media exploring morally ambiguous heroes and anti-heroes. Trailers and promotional content for the series continue to leverage its satirical edge. Teasers juxtapose superhero spectacle with graphic violence, emphasizing the show's darkly comedic tone while signaling that viewers should not expect traditional heroics. Viral marketing, including fictional Vought campaigns, blurs the line between the series and reality, reflecting the show's ongoing exploration of media manipulation. Merchandising expands the series' reach while maintaining its satirical tone. Products such as costumes, collectibles, and branded items mimic Vaught's fictional corporate output, serving as a meta-commentary on consumerism, branding, and corporate influence in entertainment. This self-referential approach enhances the narrative by demonstrating the inescapable influence of branding and media spectacle, both within the series and in the real world. Looking forward, future seasons are expected to delve deeper into the systemic nature of corruption and power. The final narrative arcs will likely explore not only the resolution of Homelander's threat but also the broader dismantling or transformation of Vought International and its mechanisms of control. The fates of the boys, the young supers at Gen V, and remaining members of the Seven will converge toward a climactic resolution that balances high-stakes action with philosophical exploration of morality, power, and accountability. The thematic resonance of the boys extends beyond entertainment. It serves as a commentary on the human condition, exploring how ambition, fear, trauma, and desire for power can corrupt even those with the best intentions. It also emphasizes the importance of accountability, empathy, and moral courage in a world where the powerful often act without consequence. The series' unflinching depiction of violence, corruption, and human frailty challenges viewers to consider how society elevates and controls individuals with extraordinary abilities or influence. In conclusion, The Boys is a landmark series in the superhero genre, subverting traditional narratives to provide a darkly satirical, emotionally rich, and intellectually engaging story. Its combination of morally complex characters, systemic critique, shocking action, and political commentary has redefined audience expectations for superhero media. The show forces viewers to confront uncomfortable truths about power, corruption, and the cost of heroism. Its success lies not only in entertainment value but in its ability to provoke reflection on real-world social, political, and ethical issues. By blending spectacle with moral inquiry, The Boys remains an essential cultural touchstone for understanding the perils of unchecked authority and the enduring human struggle for justice and integrity. Homelander is the undisputed central antagonist of the series. Modeled after a dark version of Superman, he possesses superhuman strength, flight, near invulnerability, heat vision, enhanced senses, and regenerative capabilities. His psychological profile is complex. He suffers from extreme narcissism, emotional immaturity, and sociopathy, stemming from his childhood in a laboratory without parental love. His main driving forces are the need for admiration, control, and emotional validation. Homelander's public persona as a patriotic hero masks a cruel, manipulative, and violent nature. Over the seasons, his arc evolves from a seemingly controlled but arrogant leader into a fully unrestrained tyrant. His relationship with Ryan, his son, adds an additional layer of emotional and ethical complexity, as Homelander's paternal instincts clash with his narcissism and authoritarian tendencies. Billy Butcher is the leader of the boys and serves as the primary human antagonist to the Supes. He has no inherent superpowers but is highly intelligent, physically fit, and ruthless. His primary motivation is vengeance against Homelander for the presumed death of his wife, Becca, and for the general corruption of Supes. Butcher's psychological makeup is defined by trauma, obsession, and moral flexibility. He is willing to commit extreme acts to achieve his goals. Over time, Butcher's arc explores the moral cost of revenge, showing how his crusade consumes him and blurs the line between hero and villain. His temporary use of Temp V enhances his power but also accelerates his psychological decline, symbolizing the corrupting influence of power even on the morally aware. Huey Campbell is the emotional and moral anchor of the series. Initially introduced as a kind, timid young man whose girlfriend is killed by a Supe, he evolves into a skilled and morally conscious member of the boys. Huey's temporary use of Temp V demonstrates the ethical dilemmas of wielding power. His relationship with Starlight highlights the tension between personal loyalty and the moral imperatives of justice. Huey's journey is one of maturation, as he learns to navigate a world where good and evil are rarely clear-cut, and every decision carries significant consequences. Annie January Starlight begins as a hopeful, idealistic superheroine who joins the Seven expecting to do good. She is later confronted with the corruption and exploitation inherent in Vought International. Her powers include energy projection and enhanced strength. Her arc involves balancing her desire for justice with survival within a deeply corrupt system. Starlight's public resistance and advocacy highlight themes of integrity, courage, and the societal cost of speaking truth to power. Her personal growth from naive idealist to effective resistor reflects one of the core moral threads of the series. Queen Maeve. Queen Maeve is a seasoned superhero whose powers include superhuman strength, durability, and combat expertise. She initially aligns with the Seven out of loyalty and self-preservation but grows increasingly disillusioned with their corruption. Maeve's arc explores moral compromise, fear, and the personal cost of long-term exposure to unethical environments. Her eventual acts of rebellion, though risky and personally costly, demonstrate the persistence of conscience even under systemic oppression. Frenchie and Kimiko. Frenchie, a skilled fighter and tactician, and Kimiko, a mute but deadly superpowered operative, provide both emotional and tactical depth to the boys. Frenchie's chaotic nature and past criminality contrast with his loyalty and ingenuity, while Kimiko's struggle to reclaim humanity after trauma adds emotional gravitas. Their relationship is a rare depiction of intimacy and healing amidst violence and loss. Kimiko's abilities include superhuman strength, agility, and resilience, while Frenchie's expertise lies in strategy, weapons, and improvisation. A-Train, a speedster Supe and member of the Seven, A-Train's abilities include superhuman speed and reflexes. His character explores themes of addiction, guilt, and the consequences of extreme competitiveness. His morally ambiguous choices often reflect the pressures of fame and corporate control. The Deep, an aquatic Supe with the ability to communicate with marine life, the Deep's arc serves as a critique of performative redemption. His self-centered and insecure nature complicates his attempts to reform, demonstrating the limits of superficial moral gestures in a corrupt system. Stormfront. Stormfront is introduced as a charismatic superheroine with a hidden agenda rooted in extremist ideology. Her arc explores how dangerous ideologies can be packaged attractively and infiltrate social consciousness. She serves as a narrative vehicle to address the dangers of radicalization and media manipulation. Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy is the original American Supe and a violent, morally compromised patriarchal figure. His abilities include strength, durability, and combat mastery. His relationship with Homelander functions both as a literal father-son dynamic and as a symbolic representation of generational cycles of abuse and corruption. Soldier Boy's arc is critical for exploring historical continuity in Vought's exploitation of Supes. Vought International. While not a single character, Vought functions as an omnipresent antagonist. Its manipulation of Supes, governments, media, and public perception is central to the series' critique of corporate and political corruption. Executives like Stan Edgar epitomize cold, calculated governance, and their actions drive much of the systemic conflict. Season-by-season plot breakdown. Season 1 introduces the boys, Huey's personal loss, the recruitment into the group, and the initial exposure of Vought's corruption. Homelander's control and the Seven's moral corruption are established. Key themes include vengeance, exploitation, and the consequences of unchecked power. Season 2 expands the political and ethical complexity. Stormfront is introduced, tempers rise, and the boys face greater risks. Themes of radicalization, media manipulation, and systemic control are explored. Huey and Starlight struggle with personal and ethical conflicts, while Butcher's obsession deepens. Season 3, Temp V is introduced, temporarily empowering humans. Soldier Boy appears, providing historical context to the system of corruption. The moral dilemmas of wielding power are central, and the psychological costs of vengeance are emphasized. Relationships and alliances are tested, and Homelander's instability escalates. Season 4 focuses on the looming threat of authoritarian dominance by Homelander, the escalation of public and global stakes, and the potential dismantling of Vought's systems. Characters confront personal and systemic consequences, and the stakes for survival and morality reach a climax. Throughout all seasons, the series balances dark humor, extreme violence, emotional depth, and social commentary. Every action carries ethical weight, and consequences ripple across characters and society. The adaptation from comic to screen maintains the spirit of the original while enhancing psychological realism and emotional resonance. The series' influence extends beyond entertainment. It critiques hero worship, media manipulation, political polarization, corporate overreach, and human susceptibility to corruption. The complex interplay between morality, power, and consequence makes The Boys not only a compelling narrative but also a profound social and philosophical commentary. Homelander is the undisputed central antagonist of the series. Modeled after a dark version of Superman, he possesses superhuman strength, flight, near invulnerability, heat vision, enhanced senses, and regenerative capabilities. His psychological profile is complex. He suffers from extreme narcissism, emotional immaturity, and sociopathy, stemming from his childhood in a laboratory without parental love. His main driving forces are the need for admiration, control, and emotional validation. Homelander's public persona as a patriotic hero masks a cruel, manipulative, and violent nature. Over the seasons, his arc evolves from a seemingly controlled but arrogant leader into a fully unrestrained tyrant. His relationship with Ryan, his son, adds an additional layer of emotional and ethical complexity, as Homelander's paternal instincts clash with his narcissism and authoritarian tendencies. Billy Butcher is the leader of the boys and serves as the primary human antagonist to the Supes. He has no inherent superpowers but is highly intelligent, physically fit, and ruthless. His primary motivation is vengeance against Homelander for the presumed death of his wife, Becca, and for the general corruption of Supes. Butcher's psychological makeup is defined by trauma, obsession, and moral flexibility. He is willing to commit extreme acts to achieve his goals. Over time, Butcher's arc explores the moral cost of revenge, showing how his crusade consumes him and blurs the line between hero and villain. His temporary use of Temp V enhances his power but also accelerates his psychological decline, symbolizing the corrupting influence of power even on the morally aware. Huey Campbell is the emotional and moral anchor of the series. Initially introduced as a kind, timid young man whose girlfriend is killed by a Supe, he evolves into a skilled and morally conscious member of the boys. Huey's temporary use of Temp V demonstrates the ethical dilemmas of wielding power. His relationship with Starlight highlights the tension between personal loyalty and the moral imperatives of justice. Huey's journey is one of maturation, as he learns to navigate a world where good and evil are rarely clear-cut, and every decision carries significant consequences. Starlight, Annie January Starlight begins as a hopeful, idealistic superheroine who joins the Seven expecting to do good. She is later confronted with the corruption and exploitation inherent in Vought International. Her powers include energy projection and enhanced strength. Her arc involves balancing her desire for justice with survival within a deeply corrupt system. Starlight's public resistance and advocacy highlight themes of integrity, courage, and the societal cost of speaking truth to power. Her personal growth from naive idealist to effective resistor reflects one of the core moral threads of the series. Queen Maeve is a seasoned superhero whose powers include superhuman strength, durability, and combat expertise. She initially aligns with the Seven out of loyalty and self-preservation but grows increasingly disillusioned with their corruption. Maeve's arc explores moral compromise, fear, and the personal cost of long-term exposure to unethical environments. Her eventual acts of rebellion, though risky and personally costly, demonstrate the persistence of conscience even under systemic oppression. Frenchie and Kimiko, Frenchie, a skilled fighter and tactician, and Kimiko, a mute but deadly superpowered operative, provide both emotional and tactical depth to the boys. Frenchie's chaotic nature and past criminality contrast with his loyalty and ingenuity, while Kimiko's struggle to reclaim humanity after trauma adds emotional gravitas. Their relationship is a rare depiction of intimacy and healing amidst violence and loss. Kimiko's abilities include superhuman strength, agility, and resilience, while Frenchie's expertise lies in strategy, weapons, and improvisation. A-Train, a speedster Supe and member of the Seven, A-Train's abilities include superhuman speed and reflexes. His character explores themes of addiction, guilt, and the consequences of extreme competitiveness. His morally ambiguous choices often reflect the pressures of fame and corporate control. The Deep, an aquatic soup with the ability to communicate with marine life, the Deep's arc serves as a critique of performative redemption. His self-centered and insecure nature complicates his attempts to reform, demonstrating the limits of superficial moral gestures in a corrupt system. Stormfront. Stormfront is introduced as a charismatic superheroine with a hidden agenda rooted in extremist ideology. Her arc explores how dangerous ideologies can be packaged attractively and infiltrate social consciousness. She serves as a narrative vehicle to address the dangers of radicalization and media manipulation. Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy is the original American soup and a violent, morally compromised patriarchal figure. His abilities include strength, durability, and combat mastery. His relationship with Homelander functions both as a literal father-son dynamic and as a symbolic representation of generational cycles of abuse and corruption. Soldier Boy's arc is critical for exploring historical continuity in Vought's exploitation of Supes. Vought International. While not a single character, Vought functions as an omnipresent antagonist. Its manipulation of Supes, governments, media, and public perception is central to the series' critique of corporate and political corruption. Executives like Stan Edgar epitomize cold, calculated governance, and their actions drive much of the systemic conflict. Season-by-season plot breakdown. Season 1 introduces the boys, Huey's personal loss, the recruitment into the group, and the initial exposure of Vought's corruption. Homelander's control and the Seven's moral corruption are established. Key themes include vengeance, exploitation, and the consequences of unchecked power. Season 2 expands the political and ethical complexity. Stormfront is introduced, tempers rise, and the boys face greater risks. Themes of radicalization, media manipulation, and systemic control are explored. Huey and Starlight struggle with personal and ethical conflicts, while Butcher's obsession deepens. Season 3 Temp V is introduced, temporarily empowering humans. Soldier Boy appears, providing historical context to the system of corruption. The moral dilemmas of wielding power are central, and the psychological costs of vengeance are emphasized. Relationships and alliances are tested, and Homelander's instability escalates. Season 4 focuses on the looming threat of authoritarian dominance by Homelander, the escalation of public and global stakes, and the potential dismantling of Vought's systems. Characters confront personal and systemic consequences, and the stakes for survival and morality reach a climax. Throughout all seasons, the series balances dark humor, extreme violence, emotional depth, and social commentary. Every action carries ethical weight, and consequences ripple across characters and society. The adaptation from comic to screen maintains the spirit of the original while enhancing psychological realism and emotional resonance. The series' influence extends beyond entertainment. It critiques hero worship, media manipulation, political polarization, corporate overreach, and human susceptibility to corruption. The complex interplay between morality, power, and consequence makes The Boys not only a compelling narrative but also a profound social and philosophical commentary. Season 1, 2019. The inaugural season consists of 8 episodes and establishes the universe's core conflicts. It begins with Huey Campbell witnessing the death of his girlfriend at the hands of A-Train, catalyzing his recruitment into The Boys by Billy Butcher. Early episodes focus on introducing the morally corrupt superheroes of the Seven, particularly Homelander, whose public persona contrasts with his private cruelty. Starlight joins the Seven and faces immediate sexual harassment and manipulation, highlighting Vought's exploitation of Supes. The boys employ espionage, blackmail, and sabotage to expose wrongdoing, culminating in a tense showdown where Homelander's terrifying abilities are fully revealed. This season sets the tone for the series' mix of dark humor, social satire, and graphic violence. Easter eggs include visual nods to the original comics, hidden Vought propaganda, and subtle foreshadowing of characters like Soldier Boy. Season 2 2020. This season expands both the political and moral complexity. Stormfront is introduced as a new member of the Seven, presenting an ideology rooted in white supremacist propaganda hidden beneath a polished superhero image. Her storyline critiques radicalization and the manipulation of media to normalize extremist beliefs. The boys face increasing danger as Vought's corporate and military influence grows, forcing them to navigate a delicate web of power, exposure, and personal ethics. Key moments include Huey and Starlight struggling with secrets in their relationship, Frenchie and Kimiko dealing with trauma recovery, and Butcher deepening his vendetta against Homelander. Visual Easter eggs include historical comic references, hidden background headlines, and subtle foreshadowing of Soldier Boy's introduction. Season 3, 2022 introduces Temp V, a temporary version of Compound V that gives ordinary humans superpowers for a limited time, challenging the notion that Supes are the only powerful beings. This season also introduces Soldier Boy, providing historical context for Vought's systemic corruption. Huey experiments with Temp V, revealing ethical dilemmas about the use of power. Butcher's moral descent accelerates as his obsession grows, demonstrating how vengeance corrodes the human soul. Homelander's instability escalates, leading to increasingly authoritarian behavior. Key plot twists include betrayals, moral compromises, and public exposure of Vought's darker secrets. Subtle visual Easter eggs reference both historical superhero archetypes and original comic book arcs. Season 4, 2024. This season further escalates global stakes as Homelander's threat reaches authoritarian dimensions. Conflicts expand beyond the boys versus the Seven to include governments, media conglomerates, and public opinion, highlighting systemic corruption. Characters are pushed to their physical, emotional, and moral limits. Starlight's public activism becomes a central narrative thread, showing the cost of standing against corruption. Butcher, Huey, and the boys face high-risk missions that test their alliances, morality, and survival. Soldier Boy's influence continues to provide insight into the historical construction of hero worship and systemic abuse. Easter eggs include hidden Vought memos, comic-inspired character nods, and subtle references to broader societal commentary. Awards and critical reception. The Boys has received widespread acclaim for acting, writing, and production. Anthony Starr's performance as Homelander is often highlighted as one of the most compelling villain portrayals on modern television. Carl Urban, Aaron Moriarty, and Jack Quaid have also received praise for bringing emotional depth to their complex roles. The series has been nominated for and won awards in categories including Best Action Series, Visual Effects, Stunt Coordination, and Acting. Its combination of satire, political commentary, and emotional storytelling has earned critical praise and substantial international viewership. Cultural impact. The series has influenced popular discourse on hero worship, corporate influence, and the ethics of power. Homelander has become a cultural symbol representing the dangers of unchecked authority and narcissistic leadership. Starlight's arc has been discussed in conversations about workplace exploitation and standing up to systemic injustice. The show's depiction of media manipulation, radicalization, and political influence resonates with contemporary global issues, sparking debate and analysis across social media, academic commentary, and fan communities. Merchandise, cosplay, and viral marketing campaigns have further solidified the series' cultural footprint. Predicted series finale scenario. While the official ending has not yet been released, multiple narrative threads suggest the following possibilities. Homelander faces a final confrontation where his authoritarian ambitions are directly challenged by the boys and public exposure. The resolution is expected to emphasize systemic consequences rather than a simple defeat of one villain, possibly dismantling or fundamentally changing Vought International. Character arcs, including Butcher's moral reckoning, Huey's struggle to maintain humanity, Starlight's public resistance, and Ryan's potential role as a morally guided superhuman, are likely to converge. The finale will likely balance high-stakes action with deep moral and philosophical commentary, providing both emotional closure and thematic resonance. Symbolism and themes. Throughout the series, recurring symbolism reinforces central themes. Vought's branding represents corporate manipulation and media control. Supes' public versus private personas highlight the conflict between image and reality. Compound V serves as a metaphor for unnatural, externally imposed power and the ethical dilemmas that arise from artificial advantage. Homelander embodies unchecked authoritarianism, while the boys symbolize ordinary people challenging systemic corruption. The narrative continuously explores moral ambiguity, the consequences of vengeance, and the societal cost of hero worship. Future outlook: spin-offs like Gen V suggest that the universe will continue exploring the moral and social implications of superpowered individuals. The training of young Supes demonstrates that systemic corruption and moral compromise begin early and are perpetuated by institutional structures. The boys' struggle may inspire broader resistance against systemic abuse, reflecting the series' ongoing engagement with ethical questions and societal critique. In conclusion, The Boys is a landmark series that combines graphic action, dark humor, emotional depth, and incisive social commentary. Its characters, from Homelander to Starlight to Butcher, are deeply complex and morally ambiguous, reflecting the series' exploration of power, corruption, and accountability. Through detailed storytelling, intricate world-building, and a relentless critique of corporate, political, and social systems, the show has redefined what superhero narratives can achieve. By blending spectacle with philosophical inquiry, The Boys offers a profoundly challenging and engaging viewing experience, solidifying its place as a culturally and critically significant work in contemporary television. If you want, I can next produce a full visual guide with character diagrams, relationship maps, and timeline of events for all seasons, which will serve as a complete ultimate reference for The Boys universe, fully complementing this textual megadocument. In The Boys, the central antagonist is Homelander, a superhuman with nearly invincible strength, flight, heat vision, and enhanced senses, whose public persona as a patriotic hero masks his narcissism, sociopathy, and emotional immaturity. His psychological complexity stems from being raised in a laboratory without parental love, and his driving motivations are validation, control, and dominance. Homelander's relationships reveal both his vulnerabilities and dangers. His son Ryan represents a rare emotional connection that conflicts with his authoritarian instincts, while Starlight's moral integrity indirectly challenges his influence, and Billy Butcher serves as his primary human nemesis, embodying the persistent resistance to his unchecked power. Homelander's arc evolves from a superficially controlled and arrogant figure into a fully unrestrained tyrant, whose instability escalates to a near-apocalyptic threat by the later seasons. Billy Butcher, leader of the Boys, is defined by his obsessive quest for vengeance against Homelander, motivated by the presumed death of his wife, Becca, and the systemic corruption of the superheroes. He possesses no superpowers but is highly intelligent, physically capable, and morally flexible, often committing extreme acts that put himself, the boys, and innocents at risk. His psychological journey illustrates the corrosive effects of revenge. As his obsession grows, so does his moral decline. Butcher's interactions with Huey Campbell, who acts as his moral counterbalance, highlight the tension between vengeance and ethical restraint. Huey himself evolves from a timid civilian into a skilled and morally conscious fighter. His temporary use of Temp V exposes him to the intoxicating power that can easily corrupt, yet his ethical compass and relationship with Starlight guide his growth. Huey embodies the human struggle to maintain morality in a world dominated by superhuman and corporate corruption. Starlight, initially a hopeful and idealistic superheroine, quickly confronts the dark reality of Vought International, where exploitation and manipulation dominate. Her powers, including energy projection and enhanced strength, make her a formidable operative, but her true strength lies in her moral courage. She becomes both a public figure resisting corruption and a private moral anchor for Huey and other allies. Queen Maeve, a veteran member of the Seven, embodies disillusionment and moral compromise. Though initially complicit, she gradually finds opportunities to assert her conscience despite personal risk. Frenchie and Kimiko offer both emotional grounding and tactical support, their relationship serving as one of the few portrayals of intimacy and healing in a world dominated by trauma and violence. Frenchie's ingenuity and Kimiko's superhuman strength and agility make them invaluable to the boys, while also highlighting the personal cost of survival in this morally complex universe. Other members of the Seven, such as A-Train and the Deep, illustrate the pressures of fame, corporate manipulation, and personal weakness. A-Train's speed and impulsive behavior reflect the physical and moral consequences of addiction and competition, while the Deep's performative redemption highlights the limits of superficial morality. Stormfront's introduction in later seasons demonstrates the dangers of charismatic extremism and ideological manipulation, serving as a direct critique of radicalization and media influence. Soldier Boy, the original American Supe, represents generational abuse and historical corruption, his violent and morally compromised nature influencing Homelander and providing context for the long-standing systemic exploitation of Supes. Vought International itself functions as a persistent, omnipresent antagonist, manipulating superheroes, governments, media, and public perception for profit and power. Executives like Stan Edgar epitomize cold, calculated governance, demonstrating that systemic evil often operates quietly, rationally, and with massive societal consequences. Across the 4 seasons, major plot events escalate from personal revenge to global stakes. In Season 1, Huey's girlfriend's death catalyzes his involvement with the boys, while Starlight faces harassment upon joining the Seven. The boys' early operations reveal Vought's corruption and establish Homelander's terrifying abilities. Season 2 introduces Stormfront and emphasizes the dangers of radical ideology, while the boys confront increasing corporate and military opposition. Season 3 brings Temp V and Soldier Boy, expanding the narrative's exploration of power, moral compromise, and systemic corruption. Homelander's instability grows, and Butcher's obsession accelerates his moral decline. Season 4 raises the stakes to near-authoritarian levels, with Homelander threatening global dominance. Starlight emerges as a public resistance figure, while relationships and alliances within the boys and the Seven are tested to their limits, forcing all characters to confront moral, ethical, and survival challenges. Throughout the series, recurring symbolism reinforces central themes. Vought represents systemic oppression and media manipulation, Compound V and Temp V symbolize artificial power and moral corruption, Homelander embodies unchecked authoritarianism, the boys represent human resistance and moral ambiguity, and Starlight and Huey exemplify integrity and hope in a corrupt world. The narrative consistently explores the consequences of vengeance, the fragility of morality, and the societal cost of hero worship. The critical reception of The Boys reflects its cultural significance, with Anthony Starr's portrayal of Homelander frequently cited as one of television's most compelling villains. The show's combination of dark humor, political satire, and emotionally rich storytelling has sparked global discussion about morality, corporate control, and authoritarianism. Its influence extends to merchandising, cosplay, and viral marketing, which often satirically mirror Vought's in-universe corporate culture. The predicted series finale is expected to resolve the conflict with Homelander while addressing the systemic corruption of Vought, balancing high-stakes action with moral and philosophical reflection. The show's spin-offs, including Gen V, further explore the ethical and social implications of superpowers, showing how systemic corruption perpetuates across generations. Overall, The Boys presents a darkly satirical, morally complex, and socially relevant exploration of power, corruption, and human nature. Its characters are deeply nuanced, its plotlines interwoven with ethical dilemmas, and its themes resonate with contemporary global issues. The series challenges viewers to consider the consequences of unchecked authority, the cost of vengeance, and the enduring struggle to maintain morality in a world where power can corrupt even the best intentions. By blending graphic action, emotional depth, and incisive social critique, The Boys remains a landmark in modern television, redefining the superhero genre and leaving a lasting cultural impact. Season 1 of The Boys begins with a devastating personal loss that sets the tone for the series' exploration of power and morality. Huey Campbell's life is shattered when his girlfriend is accidentally killed by A-Train, a member of the Seven, whose reckless speed demonstrates the consequences of unchecked superhuman power. This event propels Huey into the orbit of Billy Butcher, whose obsession with taking down Homelander and exposing Vought International drives the main narrative. The season alternates between the corrupt, meticulously managed world of superheroes under Vought and the morally ambiguous operations of the Boys, who operate outside the law but fight to reveal the truth. Each episode meticulously reveals the contrast between public image and private behavior. Homelander's carefully crafted patriotic persona hides a terrifying combination of narcissism, cruelty, and psychological instability, while Starlight, initially a hopeful newcomer, quickly faces harassment, exploitation, and the impossible choice between survival and integrity. Subtle Easter eggs throughout the season reference the original comics, such as visual nods to Homelander's more overtly brutal behaviors and Vought propaganda that mirrors the comic's exaggerated corporate satire. In Season 2, the stakes broaden significantly. Stormfront is introduced as a new member of the Seven, her charismatic demeanor concealing a dangerous extremist ideology rooted in white supremacy. The show uses her character to explore how radical ideas can be normalized and amplified through media and celebrity culture, paralleling real-world social dynamics. The boys, meanwhile, face increasing threats from Vought's military and corporate networks, forcing them to make ethical compromises and confront the limits of their own morality. Huey and Starlight's secretive relationship provides a deeply human counterpoint to the political and superhuman conflicts around them, illustrating the tension between personal loyalty and moral duty. Butcher's obsession with Homelander deepens, and his increasingly reckless actions highlight the psychological cost of vengeance. Season 2 also foreshadows the introduction of Soldier Boy, establishing the historical lineage of corruption and hero worship that informs Homelander's rise. Throughout, the series continues to employ subtle comic references and hidden background details, news broadcasts, signage, and incidental dialogue, that reward attentive viewers. Season 3 introduces Temp V, a temporary superpower formula that allows ordinary humans to gain extraordinary abilities for a limited time. This addition forces the series to confront questions of morality, ambition, and the intoxicating influence of power. Huey briefly uses Temp V, revealing how even the most morally conscious characters can struggle with the temptation of superhuman abilities. Soldier Boy's appearance provides historical context, showing that corruption and abuse among heroes are systemic and generational, rather than isolated incidents. Homelander's mental instability escalates dramatically, with his increasingly authoritarian behavior threatening both individual lives and global stability. Butcher's moral decline accelerates in parallel, as he embraces Temp V and confronts the ethical compromises inherent in using the same kind of power he despises. Starlight continues to navigate the dangerous political and corporate terrain, balancing her moral compass against personal risk, while Frenchie and Kimiko's evolving relationship provides emotional depth amid the chaos. Easter eggs in Season 3 include nods to classic superhero comics, subtle foreshadowing of future events, and visual cues that reinforce Vought's pervasive influence on media and society. Season 4 escalates the conflict to near global stakes. Homelander's authoritarian ambitions grow unchecked, making him a threat not just to the boys but to entire populations. Starlight emerges as a central figure of public resistance, demonstrating the social and personal cost of standing up against systemic power. The boys face increasingly high-risk operations that test alliances, morality, and their ability to survive. Soldier Boy's influence and historical legacy are further explored, emphasizing the cyclical nature of corruption and hero worship. Themes of morality, vengeance, and systemic oppression dominate the season, as every major character must confront their personal demons, ethical boundaries, and societal responsibilities. Hidden details throughout the episodes, including Vought internal memos, subtle background signage, and visual callbacks to previous seasons, reward attentive fans and provide deeper context for the narrative. The series has been recognized for its critical and cultural impact. Anthony Starr's portrayal of Homelander is widely regarded as one of television's most compelling villain performances, while Carl Urban, Aaron Moriarty, and Jack Quaid have been praised for their nuanced depictions of morally complex characters. The show has earned awards and nominations in categories such as Best Action Series, Visual Effects, Stunt Coordination, and Acting, reflecting its technical and narrative excellence. Beyond formal recognition, The Boys has significantly influenced discussions on media manipulation, corporate power, hero worship, and the moral consequences of extraordinary abilities. Its dark humor, graphic violence, and incisive social critique have resonated globally, with fans and critics alike examining the series' parallels to real-world dynamics. The anticipated series finale is expected to resolve the central conflict between Homelander and the boys, while also addressing the larger systemic corruption embodied by Vought International. Predictions suggest that the resolution will not simply involve the physical defeat of a single villain but will instead explore the dismantling or transformation of the power structures that allowed Homelander and other Supes to operate with impunity. Character arcs, including Butcher's moral reckoning, Huey's struggle to maintain humanity, Starlight's public resistance, and Ryan's development as a morally guided superhuman, are likely to converge, creating a climax that balances action with deep ethical and philosophical reflection. Spin-offs such as Gen V will continue to explore the next generation of Supes and the ways systemic corruption and moral compromise are perpetuated across time. Thematically, the series consistently examines the consequences of unchecked power, the ethical ambiguity of revenge, and the societal cost of hero worship. Vought represents corporate and institutional manipulation, while Compound V and Temp V symbolize the artificial creation of power and the moral compromise that often accompanies it. Homelander embodies authoritarianism and narcissism, whereas the boys represent human resistance, ethical struggle, and the personal cost of fighting systemic injustice. Starlight and Huey exemplify the perseverance of morality, integrity, and hope amidst corruption. Through layered storytelling, detailed character development, and a combination of dark humor, graphic action, and social critique, The Boys redefines the superhero genre as a vehicle for moral inquiry, societal commentary, and intense narrative engagement. Ultimately, The Boys stands as a landmark television series, offering a morally complex, socially relevant, and emotionally compelling examination of power, corruption, and human nature. By blending graphic spectacle with philosophical depth and cultural critique, the series challenges viewers to reflect on the consequences of unchecked authority, the fragility of morality, and the personal and societal costs of heroism and vengeance. Its lasting impact lies in its ability to entertain, provoke thought, and hold a mirror to contemporary societal dynamics, ensuring its place as a seminal work in modern television storytelling. Season 1, Episode 1, The Name of the Game, sets the tone for the series with the shocking death of Huey Campbell's girlfriend, Robin, at the hands of the speedster Supe, A-Train. This tragic incident introduces viewers to the stark contrast between the public image of superheroes and their private recklessness. Huey, devastated and disoriented, encounters Billy Butcher, who immediately identifies A-Train's culpability and introduces Huey to the mission of the boys, to expose Vought International's corruption and the morally compromised nature of the Seven. The episode expertly establishes character dynamics, Homelander's charismatic yet sinister public persona, Starlight's hopeful naivety upon joining the Seven, and Butcher's obsessive, morally ambiguous drive for revenge. Subtle Easter eggs, such as background news footage hinting at the broader Vought operations and Homelander's early manipulative behavior, reward careful viewers and hint at future conflicts. Episode 2, Cherry, deepens the divide between the boys and the Seven. Huey begins basic training under Butcher's guidance, learning how to operate in a world dominated by superhumans. Starlight faces her first tests of moral integrity, resisting attempts by her teammates to control and manipulate her. The episode subtly foreshadows Homelander's sociopathy through interactions that reveal his need for admiration and dominance. The show's dark humor emerges here, juxtaposing graphic violence with the polished, marketed superhero image, reinforcing the series' central satire. Episode 3, Get Some, escalates tension as the boys begin targeting specific Supes for exposure. Huey wrestles with the ethical implications of vigilante action, while Butcher demonstrates both his strategic brilliance and ruthless approach to justice. This episode begins to hint at Soldier Boy's historical influence, subtly linking past corruption to the present. Starlight experiences growing conflict with her team, learning that Vought controls not only powers but also narrative and public perception. Episode 4, The Female of the Species, introduces Kimiko, the mute and violently capable Supe, whose tragic backstory underscores the human cost of Vought's experiments. Frenchie emerges as her protector and eventual emotional anchor, providing a humanizing counterbalance to the chaos around them. Homelander's manipulative tendencies escalate as he begins to test the loyalty and obedience of both allies and the public. Easter eggs include visual references to the comic's more graphic depictions of violence and subtle cues about Kimiko's past affiliations. Episode 5, Good for the Soul, explores the intersection of personal trauma and systemic corruption. Butcher's obsession with vengeance drives him to morally questionable decisions, while Huey continues to grow into his role as an operative, learning the strategic and ethical complexities of fighting Supes. Starlight's public image becomes increasingly at odds with her private ethical stance, highlighting the tension between survival in a corporate-controlled environment and moral integrity. Episode 6, The Innocents, begins to tie individual arcs to broader systemic critiques. Homelander demonstrates his authoritarian potential, while Vought's media manipulation becomes more pronounced. The boys' operations intensify, revealing the difficulty of combating a system that controls both power and perception. Visual cues and background details foreshadow future character confrontations, including Soldier Boy's eventual introduction and the escalation of temp-V-related plotlines. Episode 7, The Self-Preservation Society, focuses on strategic planning and alliance building. Huey and Starlight's ethical decisions are tested under extreme pressure, and the series' exploration of moral ambiguity reaches a peak. Butcher's obsession nearly compromises the team, illustrating the human cost of vengeance. Subtle Easter eggs reference original comic sequences and hint at future disruptions within the Seven's hierarchy. Episode 8, You Found Me, culminates Season 1 with high-stakes confrontation. The boys' exposure of Vought's corruption reaches a critical moment, though Homelander's sheer power ensures that immediate victory is impossible. Character arcs converge. Huey has grown in agency and moral awareness, Starlight has solidified her personal ethics despite corporate pressure, and Butcher faces the consequences of obsession-driven tactics. The season closes by cementing the show's central themes of moral ambiguity, systemic corruption, and the peril of unchecked power, leaving viewers primed for escalating conflict in Season 2. Season 2 begins with Episode 1, The Big Ride, where the boys confront both internal and external challenges. Stormfront, a new and charismatic member of the Seven, is introduced, symbolizing the dangers of radicalization and media manipulation. Homelander's instability increases, and the tension between public heroism and private cruelty intensifies. Huey and Starlight navigate the strain on their relationship caused by secrecy and ethical dilemmas. Butcher's vendetta deepens, illustrating the moral cost of vengeance as his decisions become increasingly extreme. Easter eggs in this season include historical references to Soldier Boy and foreshadowing of temp-V experimentation, linking past corruption to current crises. Subsequent episodes in Season 2 explore the growing complexity of systemic corruption, personal trauma, and ethical compromise. Stormfront manipulates public opinion while the boys attempt to expose Vought's operations without causing catastrophic collateral damage. Starlight becomes a public figure of resistance, while Huey's moral compass guides the boys through ethical dilemmas. Butcher's obsession escalates, forcing him to confront the consequences of aligning his tactics with the same ruthless logic he despises in Supes. Easter eggs throughout include nods to comic storylines, visual references to Vought's propaganda campaigns, and subtle foreshadowing of Soldier Boy's eventual confrontation with Homelander. Season 3 introduces temp-V, expanding the narrative's focus to the intoxicating effects of power on ordinary humans. Huey temporarily gains superhuman abilities, forcing him to confront moral compromise firsthand. Soldier Boy's historical legacy provides context for the systemic nature of hero corruption. Homelander's authoritarian tendencies intensify, creating existential threats for both the boys and the general public. Butcher's moral descent accelerates, and Starlight's resistance becomes more public, reflecting the growing societal stakes. Frenchie and Kimiko's relationship continues to provide emotional grounding amidst escalating violence and ethical complexity. Easter eggs and comic references enrich the storytelling, connecting the television adaptation to its original source material. Season 4 pushes the narrative to near-global stakes. Homelander's unchecked power threatens entire populations, while Starlight emerges as a central figure of public resistance. The boys face increasingly high-risk operations, testing alliances, morality, and their capacity for survival. Soldier Boy's historical influence underscores the generational perpetuation of systemic corruption. Themes of morality, vengeance, and systemic oppression dominate, as every character confronts their personal demons and ethical boundaries. Hidden details throughout the season, including subtle references to Vought memos, visual callbacks, and minor plot cues, reward attentive viewers and provide depth to ongoing storylines. Throughout all seasons, The Boys consistently balances graphic action, dark humor, and social critique. The interplay between characters like Homelander, Butcher, Huey, and Starlight highlights the ethical ambiguity of revenge and heroism, while Vought International embodies systemic exploitation and media manipulation. Compound V and Temp V serve as symbols of artificial power and moral compromise. By blending spectacle with philosophical inquiry, the series provides a morally complex, culturally relevant, and emotionally engaging narrative that redefines the superhero genre. Its global popularity, critical acclaim, and influence on contemporary media discourse underscore its lasting impact. Season 1, Episode 1, The Name of the Game, establishes the tone of the series with a sudden, shocking event, the death of Huey Campbell's girlfriend, Robin, who is killed by the super speedster A-Train in a reckless accident. This incident not only serves as the catalyst for Huey's personal journey but also highlights the central premise of The Boys: superheroes, while publicly revered, are morally compromised and often dangerous. Huey's encounter with Billy Butcher introduces the core conflict, Vought International's manipulation and cover-up of superhuman atrocities, and sets up the moral framework of the show, where ordinary humans attempt to confront a systemically corrupt superhuman elite. Homelander's dual nature is subtly revealed in early scenes, juxtaposing his public image of a flawless hero with glimpses of sociopathy and narcissism. The episode contains visual Easter eggs referencing the original comics, including hints at Compound V and subtle newspaper headlines that foreshadow systemic corruption. Episode 2, Cherry, expands on the development of both the boys and the Seven. Huey undergoes his initial training under Butcher's guidance, learning espionage, surveillance, and strategic thinking to operate effectively against superhumans. The episode explores Starlight's early challenges, particularly harassment and ethical pressure from her team, emphasizing the contrast between the marketed superhero image and the reality of corporate exploitation. Homelander's manipulative tendencies become more apparent as he tests loyalty and exerts subtle control over his team, demonstrating the breadth of his sociopathy. Visual Easter eggs, such as background news footage and the subtle depiction of Vought branding, reinforce the show's critique of corporate influence and media manipulation. Episode 3, Get Some, focuses on the boys' first major operational initiatives. Huey's moral struggle intensifies as he participates in morally ambiguous missions against Supes, questioning whether the ends justify the means. Butcher demonstrates both strategic brilliance and moral flexibility, revealing the personal costs of pursuing vengeance. Starlight's internal conflict deepens, as she navigates corporate pressures and ethical dilemmas. Foreshadowing of Soldier Boy is subtly embedded in archival footage and historical references, emphasizing the long-standing nature of corruption and systemic abuse in the superhero world. Episode 4, The Female of the Species, introduces Kimiko, the mute and superhumanly strong character whose tragic backstory illustrates Vaught's ruthless experimentation on humans. Frenchie emerges as her protector and emotional anchor, highlighting the humanizing element within the boys. Homelander escalates his manipulative behavior, testing loyalty and control over both teammates and public perception. Easter eggs include subtle nods to Kimiko's comic origins, her past associations, and hidden visual cues referencing more violent sequences from the original material. Episode 5, Good for the Soul, examines the intersection of personal trauma and systemic corruption. Butcher's actions increasingly blur moral lines, and Huey's ethical awareness deepens as he learns to navigate high-stakes operations. Starlight's struggle with corporate exploitation versus personal integrity becomes a central narrative thread. This episode further explores the consequences of power misuse, not only for Supes but for those attempting to hold them accountable. Episode 6, The Innocents emphasizes the broader systemic critique of Vought International. Homelander's authoritarian tendencies are more evident, and the boys' operational risks highlight the difficulty of combating a system that controls both superhuman ability and public perception. Visual cues and background details foreshadow future conflicts, including Soldier Boy's eventual appearance and Temp V experimentation, linking historical corruption to contemporary events. Episode 7, The Self-Preservation Society delves into strategic planning, alliances, and moral testing. Huey and Starlight face heightened ethical challenges under extreme circumstances, while Butcher's obsession increasingly endangers the team. Subtle Easter eggs reference comic sequences, Vought's manipulation tactics, and foreshadowed disruptions within the Seven's hierarchy. Episode 8, You Found Me, concludes Season 1 with a tense climax. The boys' exposure of Vought's corruption reaches a critical juncture, but Homelander's raw power ensures the resolution is incomplete. Character arcs converge, Huey gains agency and moral clarity, Starlight solidifies her ethical stance despite corporate pressure, and Butcher confronts the consequences of obsession-driven tactics. The episode cements the series' central themes, moral ambiguity, systemic corruption, and the peril of unchecked authority, while setting the stage for escalating conflicts in Season 2. Season 2 opens with Episode 1, The Big Ride, introducing Stormfront, a charismatic new member of the Seven whose extremist ideology demonstrates the dangers of radicalization and media manipulation. Homelander's psychological instability intensifies, and the series expands its focus on public perception versus private reality. Huey and Starlight navigate relationship tensions, balancing personal loyalty with ethical obligations. Butcher's vendetta deepens, and subtle Easter eggs hint at Soldier Boy's historical influence and upcoming Temp V experimentation. Subsequent episodes of Season 2 explore the growing complexity of systemic corruption, personal trauma, and moral compromise. Stormfront manipulates media and public opinion, while the boys attempt to expose Vought's crimes without causing catastrophic collateral damage. Starlight's growing role as a public advocate reflects the societal stakes and personal cost of ethical resistance. Butcher's obsession escalates, showing the personal toll of vengeance as he adopts morally questionable tactics. Easter eggs and comic references enrich the season, connecting television storytelling to the original material and rewarding attentive fans. Season 3 expands the narrative with Temp V, allowing ordinary humans to gain temporary superpowers and forcing characters to confront the moral implications of extraordinary abilities. Huey experiments with Temp V, illustrating the seductive nature of power and ethical compromise. Soldier Boy provides historical context, revealing that hero corruption and systemic abuse are generational issues rather than isolated incidents. Homelander's authoritarian tendencies escalate, posing existential threats to the boys and the public. Butcher's moral decline continues, and Starlight's public resistance solidifies, underscoring the stakes for ordinary humans trying to hold Supes accountable. Frenchie and Kimiko's relationship offers emotional grounding amidst the chaos, while visual and narrative Easter eggs link the series to comic arcs and past storylines. Season 4 escalates conflicts to near-global stakes. Homelander's unchecked power threatens widespread catastrophe, while Starlight becomes a prominent figure of public resistance. The boys face increasingly high-risk operations that test morality, alliances, and survival capacity. Soldier Boy's historical influence emphasizes the generational perpetuation of systemic corruption, reinforcing the series' critique of institutionalized power. Themes of morality, vengeance, and systemic oppression dominate as each character confronts personal and ethical limits. Hidden visual and narrative details throughout reward careful viewing and deepen the overarching story. Across all seasons, The Boys maintains a consistent balance of graphic action, dark humor, and social commentary. Character arcs, from Homelander's authoritarianism to Butcher's moral decline, Huey's ethical growth, and Starlight's resistance, emphasize the moral ambiguity of revenge and heroism. Vought International represents systemic exploitation and media control, while Compound V and Temp V symbolize artificial power and moral compromise. By blending spectacle with philosophical and societal commentary, the series delivers a morally complex, culturally resonant, an emotionally engaging narrative that redefines the superhero genre.